Hey beautiful human, it's RidersDX and we've got a super interesting video topic for you all today. Our topic today is on the gone too soon video games of SpongeBob's past, as we're going to take an in-depth look at some cancelled SpongeBob games. The first game we're going to chat about is SpongeBob SquarePants and Nicktoons Gravejet Racing. This was a racing game planned for release in 2009 featuring characters from SpongeBob, Barnyard, Ren and Stimpy, Fanboy and Chum Chum, My Life as a Teenage Robot, The Mighty Bee, and maybe even more. This game must have been pretty far in development, as the ESRB rated the game and gave it an E rating, along with stating that it was intended to be released for the Xbox 360 and PC. There was also reportedly a Wii version development, but it seemed to have been scrapped before the rating. To this day, however, we still don't know who was actually developing this game. We do know of some people that were involved in it, but not an actual developer. The game would have played similarly to F-Zero in the sense that it was designed to be a futuristic racer. It had a feature for battling with weapons along with panels on the track, which when a character drives over them, the cart would have slowed down or spun out. Every character would be assigned a unique cart which stayed in the art style of the series, represented but made into futuristic versions. SpongeBob, for instance, seems to be sporting a vehicle based heavily off a boat, but it's got rocket-fueled pipes for that futuristic style. We've actually got detailed pictures of the models of other vehicles like Fanboy Chum, Bessie from The Mighty Bee, and XJ9 from My Life as a Teenage Robot. There's also one of Ren and Stimpy with the actual models placed in the vehicle, so this all looks really cool. The racetracks also seem to all take place in the air, with numerous twists and turns and even gravity mechanics, as you can see from some of these tracks that twist around quite frequently. The game never left the beta stage and was cancelled due to financial difficulties. No builds of the game have been released online, only screenshots. However, it looks like there was an attempt to reskin the racer into a different property called Gravejet, and there was a Kickstarter to get it funded. Unfortunately, they were unable to meet the pledge goals, so it never got anywhere. One of the developers did post some gameplay footage of it, and it looks a lot like that F-Zero sequel we've all been waiting for. I feel when it comes to racing games, we're definitely not sure on Nickelodeon renditions. I mean, you gotta admit, if you want to create an easily accessible game propelled by its IPs, a kart racing game is one of the most widespread ways to do that, and continues to be the method to go for in many IPs' first foray into the gaming world. But Gravejet was unique in the sense that it wasn't just another Mario Kart based experience, but based on another racing experience not as widespread, F-Zero. It's an odd concept for a Nickelodeon game. The only franchise this kind of game makes sense for here is XJ9, but nonetheless, it's cool seeing Otis from Barnyard in such a contraption. I really do wish we got to see what this game would have been like, especially since it was so far along that it even got rated by the ESRB. It's hard to imagine Nickelodeon losing that much more money releasing it if they'd already invested enough money to get the game that far into development. I'd be all for it if they ever wanted to revisit this concept again, and it'd be wild seeing some of the more modern Nicktoons make it in here, like the Loud House and what their vehicles will look like. It's admittedly a less appealing concept than a simple kart racer, but I really appreciate the out there idea for Nickelodeon. It's those kinds of games that always spark the most discussion and interest, so maybe one day? SpongeBob 40 Wings is actually pretty unknown throughout the community, but 40 Wings was actually the initial concept of what would turn out to be Creature from the Krusty Krab, but the ideas are just so crazy and different enough that I wanted to take some time to discuss them here. Special shout out to Who Needs Normal, who had contacted the developers at Blitz Games to obtain all this information. He has a video on his YouTube channel that goes through all the details, and I actually helped him out with presenting it, so definitely check that out. According to Who Needs Normal, this was an initial pitch to Nickelodeon, set up as a PowerPoint presentation I'm sure they presented to the company before beginning work on Creature. The premise is still rooted in dreams, but the concept is much more clear-cut here, as SpongeBob's mission is to wake up his friends in their dreams or else they'll be asleep forever. The game had a lot of interesting features pitched for the project, such as focus levels dedicated to each character's dream, the ability for SpongeBob to transform into many objects with different mechanics, like a bowling ball and a surfboard. There was to be some sort of team mechanic as well, due to various characters joining SpongeBob in each of the levels. The pitch even outlined what the various levels would be, so let's take a quick overview of them, but definitely check out Who Needs Normal's video if you want all the details. SpongeBob's dream would have been first, and would have involved him as a movie star that would propel him through many movie ideas like being an astronaut, cowboy, and cop. Seems more like something Squirrel would dream of, but it sounds fun nonetheless. Patrick's dream would have been focused on food and is described as a candy shop heaven with milkshake rivers, candy cane trees, and marshmallow clouds. But the way to wake him up is... you know what? I'll let my past self explain this. The only way to get Patrick to wake up is to make him need a pee. You must encourage Patrick to drink from the lemonade lagoons, cola pools, and smoothie fountains in the world's... I'm sorry. Okay. I'm so sorry. It's just so funny. Holy crap. Okay. The only way to get Patrick to wake up is to make him need a pee. You must encourage Patrick to drink from the lemonade lagoons, cola pools, and smoothie fountains in the world's first bladder-based gameplay. Plankton's dream actually sounds very similar to what he ends up doing in Creature, as he's turned into a Godzilla-like monster and has released his cloned army on Bikini Bottom. Sandy's dream would consist of huge flowing islands of Texas in the sky, full of cacti, deserts, and old buildings. Squidward's dream involves him being a headmaster of an art school. I'm sure this level would be filled with many artistic interpretations of the franchise, and perhaps even a room dedicated to bold and brash. Mr. Krabs' dream involves him owning every inch of Bikini Bottom, living inside a giant mansion. Yeah, probably would be just as nightmarish as it sounds. Another interesting tidbit here is the focus on minigames. Though none of the minigames here are in the final game, it's nonetheless interesting to see that was always going to be a prominent feature, as Creature does make it a point to feature many minigames. I mean, this game just sounds really fascinating to me. So many weird ideas that I would never realize. It really is something to see just how out there Blitz games are willing to go with the franchise, as Creature from the Krusty Krab is already one of the more abstract projects in the series. I'm not sure if it would have been the masterpiece they tried to make it out to be, but it certainly would have caught the attention of many fans of the past, and could have potentially been an even bigger cult classic than Creature turned out to be. I do love the idea of traveling into the dreams of various SpongeBob characters, and I've always wanted them to explore that concept fully. Cosmic Shake may not be all about dreams, but it's taking that concept of abstract fantastical environments to the next level, and if that game is successful, I really would love to see 40 Wings get revived in some way. Maybe just leave out the joke about urine though. Wouldn't want THQ Nordic to get any lawsuits due to damaged lungs from laughter. SpongeBob Town, or SpongeBob SquarePants Online, was an online multiplayer game developed by Blue Arc Global and published by Giga Media Limited. The game was developed throughout 2011-2012 and had one open technical test between October 25th to 27th of 2012, with a release set for 2013. But of course, despite the game being very far into development, it was abruptly cancelled for unknown reasons and is now considered lost. Blue Arc's website had this premise on the website which stated, "The mayor's dark scream has jeopardized the city of Plankton into a huge explosion. Mr. Krabs, seeing the big cash opportunity, gathers up people for a reconstruction business." SpongeBob Online brings the world of SpongeBob to an MMO game experience. It's a social platform where many players can interact with each other while enjoying diverse games together. Some beta footage of the title can be found on YouTube, which includes an animated short that depicts this exact setup. SpongeBob Town followed the various adventures and antics of SpongeBob SquarePants characters living in the city. The gameplay is very similar to other MMOs at the time, like Club Penguin and Toontown, being a virtual world where you can play games and have fun with friends. You're able to dress up your character in various ways at the pro department, play various games, customize your own farm, and build a city to your liking. Racing was also a large part of the gameplay, with players being able to customize their car to race against other players in a Mario Kart-like fashion. Sometime after the technical test of SpongeBob Town, the game was abruptly cancelled for unknown reasons. No official statement was ever given by Blue Arc, Giga Media, or Nickelodeon on why the game was cancelled. The game hasn't been seen since the first technical test and has been considered lost. Attempts have been made to find SpongeBob Town, however, due to the companies moving far away from the project and language barriers with Nickelodeon Asia, the game has not been retrieved. In 2019, a Discord server has been made for the search of the game titled SpongeBob Town Hunt, with the leader of the search being YouTube user Sponges5. Around the same time, a rewritten project for SpongeBob Town was announced by user IRL Havoc. However, not much else has been heard about that project since its announcement. I can't lie, this was pretty cool to read up on. A SpongeBob MMO was never something I thought of as a game that needed to be made, but considering how expansive the world of Bikini Bottom actually is, it could have been a really fun experience to essentially become an inhabitant of the iconic town. I haven't played many of these sorts of games admittedly, and this makes me want to look more into them, specifically the other ones Cartoon Network, Disney, and Nickelodeon had invested in. But based on what we know of SpongeBob Town, it sounded like it was quite ambitious, especially from a browser-only title. I mean, the racing mechanic alone could very well be its own game, and who knows, maybe Nickelodeon will or has already made it its own game in some way. Not to mention all the different mini-games you can play in the town, the amount of customization you can make to the town your character, and the amount of socialization it was to incorporate. From my perspective, it seemed like it was going to be really beefy. So maybe the game just looked bleak in terms of its financial viability, although I really think if that was the case, then there are so many other things they could have done besides toss out a game that was practically all ready to go. Like, wouldn't that have cost them tons of money? I don't know, and unfortunately, you and I both will never know even a fraction of the story. But nonetheless, a multiplayer-oriented SpongeBob game is such an intriguing concept. It's not the first franchise you would think that benefit from such a title, but it could be really fun and immerse fans into Bikini Bottom like never before. Maybe one day a really dedicated group of fans will actually bring this game to life for the first time ever, or maybe Nickelodeon will revisit the idea whenever MMOs are trending once again. Either way, with SpongeBob nowhere near close to stopping his takeover of all things media, I'm sure someone in some place will think of the idea and be dumb and crazy enough to make it happen. SpongeBob SquarePants Happiness Square was a SpongeBob game developed sometime in the late 2000s by Heavy Iron Studios before being repurposed into SpongeBob SquarePants Truth or Square. Though the game underwent this change, a developer at Heavy Iron Studios actually confirmed the final Truth or Square title did not vary that differently from what Heavy Iron initially planned. Thank you for your note regarding SpongeBob Happiness Square / Truth or Square. It's actually the same game, just renamed at the end of the project to support the marketing of the same named TV episode that was released around the same time. The video was made early on in development to show off what we were planning to do with the game to our publishing team at THQ and partners in Nickelodeon. Nonetheless, this early version of the game was unveiled when game developer Rob Roto uploaded a short teaser / trailer that he had created for the game, and it contains some key differences from the final product that can't help but make you wonder what direction this game may have gone in before being turned into a Truth or Square tie-in. A noticeable difference in SpongeBob is that his spin attack has been replaced with him spinning with 2 spatulas in contrast to his spinning limbs in Truth or Square. Unlike in Truth or Square where the currency was happiness points, those bubbly round tokens with SpongeBob's face, the happiness points here have a square shape to them, as well as other tokens with Patrick on them. Oh, just look at that face. The last big difference here is the enemies. Unlike Truth or Square, the enemies are robots. Happiness Square has the enemies as fish from Bikini Bottom, all of which use hammers as a weapon. I'm not gonna lie, there's something very disturbing and uncanny about seeing SpongeBob murder regular NPC fish like it's nothing here, but kind of intriguing at the same time. So I'd always been interested in this build. As a kid, it always seemed like this lost version of a game I thought had so much potential, but turned out to be so mediocre, at least compared to what had come before. But now watching this footage as a wiser and more educated adult beyond his actual years, it's actually not too different. I think the different assets and such really made me think this original Truth or Square game was this hidden treasure that was bogged down by executive decision making and limited budgets. And well, maybe that's the case, but you just can't assume that from the footage we have here. This is largely the same game as what Truth or Square turned out to be. The same 3D platforming elements are present with the same linearly designed levels. We even see one of the character power-ups in action here, so it looks like the decision to make SpongeBob the sole character was a thing very early on. I don't know, maybe one day we'll learn more about this game that'll make it seem like it could have been much more than it was. But I think I just need to accept Truth or Square for what it is. A simple, special time video game that contains trace elements of the classics that came before. It's still a fun time, but not the childhood-defining adventure I really wanted it to be. The funny thing about this next game is while I was making my Nicktoons crossover video, I talked about Freeze Frame Frenzy and how much I enjoyed it, but I also mentioned how much more fun a fully 3D rendition of this concept could have been. Well, apparently a fully 3D version was in development called Nicktoons Snapshot, and shortly after I recorded that portion of the video, a full build of this project was just randomly dropped on the Hidden Palace website. Maybe the Duckles Overlord is what he says he is. I just wanted to give a quick shout to Cartoonish Wee for bringing this to my attention, and also Mike's Toontown for lending his footage for the video. It was developed by Warthog Games Z2 Studio from January 1st of 2003 until fairly close to completion, but then the studio closed down and the project was cancelled. Otherwise, it was slated to be published by THQ during Q3 or Q4 of 2004. It's worth noting that Nicktoons Unite came out the following year, so perhaps the company decided to go in a different direction for their first proper Nicktoons 3D crossover adventure. Nonetheless, we do have this build which reveals a lot of what this game could have been. If you played Freeze Frame Frenzy, it looks like this game would have had a similar structure, with levels taking place in each franchise's universe littered with characters all across the Nicktoons, and also smaller scale levels that house the bosses. The biggest difference here though is instead of the on-rails format of Freeze Frame, Snapshot would have sported fully 3D open world environments that you could traverse freely, completing whichever objectives you wanted. The most complete road here is probably Dimsdale, which is so fascinating because Dimsdale is also the first area you go to in Freeze Frame Frenzy, so this project practically would have been the mirror console counterpart for the game. In the area there are multiple NPCs and there's actually dialogue implemented with all of them, and not just with Timmy, but with other characters as well. Timmy also seems to have the ability to make platforms appear through Cosmo Wada, conjuring them up in certain spots, pointing to different characters having different abilities. You could also play through Amity Park, which looks somewhat close to completion as well, with some NPCs hanging around there as well, though no dialogue. What's really interesting here is that Danny Phantom seems like he could have had some interesting abilities himself. For instance, at this point, he shows off a high jump, which I assume works similarly to how it does in 3D Mario titles. While we're at it, Reggie from Rocket Power roller skates and looks to be able to grind on railings. She also has access to the actual snapshot mechanic of the game, as you can see here where you have the option to switch between filters, zoom in and out, and take pictures. In the Rocket Power level, Otto actually gives Reggie a task to take a picture of something, which further promotes the idea of this being an open world-esque adventure. Bikini Bottom is another area you can play through, but it is by far the least completed one, with no NPCs to be found and just some weird collisions when jumping around the buildings. There are also these smaller areas that seem to fuse these environments with mechanical elements that I'm assuming would have been the boss areas, as they look very similar to the ones in Freeze Frame Frenzy. I mean, looking through all this, I'm definitely sad we never got to see this come to fruition. I'd always said I think the Nicktoons games would have been more fun, or at least aged better if they were more like open world adventures, even if they were on a smaller scale like presented here. There's something so appealing about freely traversing these iconic locations from Nickelodeon's rich library of franchises, and games like Battle for Bikini Bottom really help to illustrate that appeal. Although Snapshot would have been an odd concept for the first ever Nickelodeon open worldish game of this nature, I nonetheless think it could have at least been a somewhat fun experience. Not to mention the amount of Nicktoons they were playing for this title is absolutely insane, and so many more could have been incorporated through simple cameos like they are in Freeze Frame Frenzy. Whether it be a photo taking game or not, I hope we get to see an open world like Nickelodeon game one day. I would love to explore Dimsdale, Amity Park, Retroville, and so many others along with a new version of Bikini Bottom. Maybe if Cosmic Shake goes well, who knows? So while all these SpongeBob games were potentially great ideas, I suppose there was one reason or another none of them had really worked out. Still, you can't help but imagine what SpongeBob games would be like if any of these actually came out. Would SpongeBob's Town have turned the franchise into a major MMORPG force? Would Happiness Squared have been even more amazing than the TV special? Would Nicktoons Snapshot have resulted in more open world games afterwards? These are the questions I can't help but ponder until the one day I finally get off probation and am allowed into the interdimensional realms once more to see the universes where these games actually came to exist. Thank you so much for watching this video. Special shout out to my patrons, New Gamer Hub, Team Rattle Sign Gamer, Trash Q, Claw84. These are my patrons / YouTube members. If you'd like to become a patron or YouTube member and get access to a whole bunch of different perks, then please check out the links in the description box below. But alright, this is Riders, riding out.